Welcome back to Conservative Conversations. I am your host, Reid.
And I'm Frank.
Today we're going to be talking about Canada and Mexico caving in the tariff wars and some further reflections on the media. But before we get started, I'd like to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. And if you'd like to access additional content, you can become a paid subscriber through our podcast host, Red Circle. All right, well, it has been yet another busy week for Donald Trump 2.0, his administration. Just today, which is the 3rd as we're recording, both Canada and Mexico have come to the table to make some agreements on these tariffs that they were threatened with. That are going to take effect soon.
Well, that's news to me. So Trudeau folded, huh?
Yeah. Yep. So far, it seems like the same agreement as in Mexico. They're sending like 10,000 of their own soldiers or whatever to their borders, respective borders, Mexico and Canada.
And Trump is happy with that.
Yep. I think, from my understanding, it's they're paused for 30 days while they work out other agreements. But I suppose if they don't come to some other kind of agreement in the meantime, at the end of those 30 days, they're going to have the tariffs put back on. Well, not back on, but will be put on.
Right.
So, and, just like we mentioned in the last episode, some people can say what they want about the tariffs, whether they're effective with the economy or not, but they're effective with making...
As a negotiator.
Yeah, negotiating tool for our allies and trade partners, which is good.
Well, I think that's crazy. Because, we just had an article come out on our website at contemporaryconservative.net just earlier today saying, it's only a matter of time before Canada folds, basically. And, you could go check the article out for yourself. But I think that's so cool. I was not aware of that. I'm glad that you saw that fact before coming to air. That's so cool to me. Because, it's like I asked you this morning. Remember when I first popped out, I said, are you tired of winning yet?
Right.
Because we're just winning. We're winning. Well, Trump is.
Right.
Trump is making us win again.
Right.
And I just think it's so enthralling.
Right, and that was, what he promised the people he was going to do. And so far, he's been sticking to his commitments and his promises.
And I love it because it's bold, it's braggadocious, it's hard line talk that he puts out. But look, all they have to do is give a little, work with us.
Yeah.
And we're America, man. We're right there.
Right.
We've been doing it all for so long. All we want is for somebody to give a little for once. Come on. And here you see it happening over and over and over again. Colombia.
Right, yeah.
Remember, they didn't want to take their people back.
Right.
Well, guess what? That happened within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Mexico was the first to fold.
Yep.
They didn't want to pay all those tariffs or whatever because there's really no choice in the matter. It would have just happened. So It's not about choice. They wanted to be able to import their cheap stuff to America. So they folded. All they had to do is say, oh, yeah, we'll help out. We got 10,000 soldiers. Boom.
Right.
And plus, that is way cheaper. These are people who are already on the payroll.
Yeah.
What more does it cost the government of Mexico to deploy these people to the border?
Right.
Ideally, nothing. What more would it cost?
Right.
These are already troops already on the dole.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Absolutely, it makes sense. I don't see how you could convince me otherwise unless you say these are 10,000 new signups that they just. That's not how it sounds. They just got sent there. It's not like they're being trained to be sent there.
Right. Yeah.
And same with Canada. What's the cheaper option? To appropriate 10,000 of your soldiers you've already got and you're already paying?
Right.
To, enforce existing law?
Right.
Or to do this tariff war with the art of the deal himself?
Yeah. One of the things I learned today from all this, Trump had a press conference I had heard some of, and one of the things he mentioned was in Canada, like, American banks don't operate in Canada. And at first I wasn't sure exactly what he meant by that, because he just said, they
won't let our banks in.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. So I wasn't sure exactly what it meant, but later on Fox Business, I heard somebody basically clarify a little more that, if you go to Canada, there are no American banks there. You're not going to find a Chase Bank. You're not going to find a Bank of America, any of those. But here,
no, that's Chase. I'm sorry.
But here, you can go find a TD Bank, which is, I forget what the Toronto Dominion Bank, which is Canada. There's a couple other Canadian banks that operate in
There's all
America.
kinds. Yeah, we take a lot of banking, yeah.
So, I mean, it's interesting how, kind of lopsided things kind of seem, and that's what Trump's trying to fix.
I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that really, I didn't want to do this because I don't want to go up on a soapbox, and I'm not. I wouldn't consider this. I'm happy to call it out when I do, but I saw some knee-jerk reaction from some of the Canadians saying that they weren't going to buy our Tennessee whiskey and they weren't going to buy our Florida orange juice, and they booed when the national anthem was played at a hockey game or something. And that kinds of stuff really upset me, and it almost made me want to do a knee-jerk reaction thing and say, I'll never drink Crown Royal again in my life.
Right.
Well, that's not true. I love Crown Royal. There's no way. And if that, what's his name, Poilievre, becomes the next prime minister, I know. Plus, I've been to Canada plenty. Me and Canada have a good track record.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction and just hate Canada.
Right.
No. So I'm so happy that they folded and all this, because I think it's just Trudeau, and his liberal MPs.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing more of it, because China's the other one that we're, I think, waiting to see if they're going to come do any kind of
Well, they'll be happy to. I'm actually kind of glad. You remember, this is one of the reasons why I'm glad we started the channel, because I want to say something I've not heard anybody else say, but China, in all sense and purposes, should be the first to fold. They've got the economy for it. America wants a little bit of extra money. Boom. They want to keep the channels open. They want to keep doing business. They're so dependent on selling us cheap goods.
Right.
There's no way that China's not going to come to the table.
Mm-hmm.
They're a huge economy.
Right.
They're second to us. Are they not? I don't want to be wrong, but they've got to be up. They've got to be super close to us.
Yeah, I think so.
There's no way for them to fold. I get Mexico and Canada are closer, and we do a lot more trading with them just because of that fact, because it's so much easier to just ship stuff across the border, the line, than it is to send it across oceans. But China's going to come to the table.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think it's just going to, I don't think it's a matter of coming to the table. I think they'll just say, okay, and just pay it.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me any.
Yeah. But I just think it's great. It's something I wanted to bring up And I think it could relate to a bunch of points. I don't know exactly what we'll get into, but it's just one of those things that, so many people have said that this will be terrible for America.
Right.
This will be horrible.
Right.
There's this great clip of Chuck Schumer. I wish we were one of those channels where I could play Chuck Schumer right here saying it, showing you, because it's laughable. It is totally laughable. He pulls up a Corona beer and says, on Super Bowl Sunday, everything's going to be more expensive. Your Corona beer, and he displays it so proudly, is going to be 25% more expensive or whatever he said. I don't have the transcript in front of me or whatever, but he says, your Corona beer is going to be more expensive. And then he laughingly, gleefully says, he holds up an avocado and he says, your guac, because he's so cool, your guac's going to be more expensive. Well, guess what? I don't think it took 24 hours. I mean, am I wrong? It didn't take 48 hours. I know I'm not wrong about that. It didn't take 48 hours and it's all undone. What he was so gleeful about is just dead wrong.
Right. Well, they make similar kind of statements with the immigration stuff, and it's really silly. Like, there are people complaining about how, their fruits are going to be more expensive because we're getting rid of all the crop pickers.
Yeah, because of all the free labor.
Yeah,
basically, the slaves. Right. We're taking the slave. The Democrat Party.
Yep.
Oh, man. All right, but I'm sorry.
No, but I mean, those comments like you're talking about from Chuck Schumer, that's just what it kind of reminds me of. They're just silly, overblown, exaggerated, just to get a rise out of people.
Well, to fear-monger and make people scared.
Exactly. Right.
And that's what I don't get is I could see, okay, if the midterms were tomorrow, and here, you're a psych guy, so I hope you get where I'm coming from, but why do it now? Why change public opinion now? There's nothing that can be done for 2 years. It's wasted effort. I mean, do you get what I'm saying? You'd almost think if they want to do the fear, doom, and gloom to scare people into voting, you would do that right before the election. Not right after an election, but we're talking about like almost developmentally challenged people here. Cognitively.
Right. Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying, and you'd think like now's not the time to double down on the same kind of stuff they've already been doing.
I love that you said that, because that takes me right into one of the stories I wanted to cover.
Sure, go ahead.
About the DNC.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen some of the coverage. I sort of suspect you might have because you're a news junkie like I am, but they just had their DNC, where they elected their new chairperson and vice chair and all of that. And it was a real whiz-bang of an event. And more of a bang than it was a whiz. Whatever. I might be mixing analogies or whatever, but it was really something. It was really something to see. And there were multiple points at which it seemed like it was just going to divulge into total chaos. Total chaos. They had these people they were climate activists from something called the Sunrise Movement.
Oh.
That just kept shouting out during the thing, we've only got a limited time left on Earth. People were shouting from the audience. And what's her name? Simone Sanders or whatever her name. I don't remember. She's one of the big talking heads from one of the networks.
I definitely recognize her name, yeah.
Yeah. She was up there saying, well, we've only got a limited time in this forum. That was her echo back to them. She's like trying to shut them up. You know, she's like, okay, we might have limited time on Earth, but we've got limited time in this forum, guys, and we're trying to do something here. Well, the protesters wouldn't even let the Democrats do their thing. Mm-hmm. And then you talk about doubling down. Well, they're doubling down on all their DEI and CRT and AA stuff. You know, all of that. They're just doubling down on all of it because they have some kind of equal representation rule within their charter as a committee, as a Democratic National Committee. And that policy meant that for every man and woman represented, there had to be another.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how you want to say it. I don't know how to say it, to be honest.
Non-binary or
something.
They don't even know, from
something
my
else.
understanding.
For every male and female present, there had to be a something else. Mm-hmm. And it really caused some problems, especially for the parliamentarians who are trying to keep... they're just like sort of the rule keepers, you know? They're non-partisan, non-political, non-whatever. They're just the rule keepers. It's like the people who... well, I'd like to say the people who write the dictionary, but even the dictionary's gotten very political anymore, so... But I hope, you know, in 30 years, well, I don't know about 30 years ago, but, you know, at some point, many years ago, the dictionary used to be just a very clear-cut thing, right? Black and white. Well, the parliamentarians were struggling with this. Like, how do we keep the rules? And who's a guy and who's a girl? And what do you mean equal representation? And how do we do fair rounds of voting? You know? Yeah. And they were really struggling. So it's like I say, the whole thing almost broke down multiple times. Mm-hmm. But then in the end, they end up electing a chair. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
It's a person. I might have the name. I'm not sure if I have it written down. But one of the things I wanted to point out in Glee, almost like Chuck Schumer, is their vice chair is a white guy.
Aren't they both white guys?
I'm not positive about that, and I don't.
They're both males.
They are both males.
Yep.
But I think you might have to be careful about that because I don't know. I'd have to look up the chair, and I didn't. I did not do so. But I can tell you their vice chair is definitely just a white guy.
Yeah.
Part of me thinks that from the research that I've done, I just don't want to be glued to it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But part of me thinks it was a black guy that
okay.
was the chair. But their vice chair is a white guy, just a skinny white kid. You almost might say kid. He's younger than us. And
he's like 24.
He looks younger than us. I'll tell you, he looks like a kid. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful in that description. It's just what he looks like to me. It's just my perception of who he is. So I just think that's so funny, and I just want to highlight that because yes, okay, I'm not just trying to do a gotcha, hee hee ha ha, the Democrats are so dumb kind of thing, but we've seen this happen over and over again. They push for these things. They push for DEI, they push for CRT, they push for AA, but Biden wound up in office instead of somebody else. This white kid, whatever his name is.
David Hogg.
Yeah, David Hogg.
Yep.
I think I knew that too. I just didn't have it in my notes. You're absolutely correct. Becomes the new vice chair. It's almost like, and to really highlight it, just to put the cherry on top, just to remind everybody, they almost broke down into chaos multiple times, and they just end up with a white dude as their vice chair again. So, I mean, I shouldn't say again, but you get what I'm saying. Like, this is almost a repeat of history where they might push and push and push for these things, but they're not doing anything. They just make a bunch of noise,
right?
And they don't even do it well.
right? One of the other things they did that I had saw a clip of is there's like, I think it was at the DNC. There was like a small panel of people, and they asked raise hands if you thought Kamala Harris lost because of racism and misogyny, and everybody raised their hand.
Well, you're right. Except the only thing I would critique, and just to tell you, because you are blind, and our audience doesn't always know that, but you wouldn't be aware of how big that panel was or wasn't. But it was all the people running. So it was actually a fair number of people.
Oh, okay.
It might have been like 9. Because then at the end were the personalities. Like one of them was Jen Psaki. One of them was this Simone Sanders. I think. I don't want to be held down to that because I don't know who she is. I know her face. And I know she's from one of the major networks or whatever. But I just don't want to, be locked down to that's what her name was.
Right.
But there were these other people. And then there was like a moderator. There was somebody who was like already chair. Who was like MC, you might call him Master of Ceremonies, who was running the whole thing. There were a bunch of people up on the stage. A bunch.
Okay.
But I get what you're saying, and I have seen that clip where there was one in particular, and he was one of the news personalities who was acting as an interviewer.
Oh, okay.
And they sort of took turns for different topics and stuff. And yeah, that was one of his, was raise your hand if you agree that this election was decided on misogyny and racism,
right,
and all that, yeah.
Right,
and he said, "You all passed,
right?"
Because they all raised their hands or whatever. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, they can't even accept the fact that they had 2 terrible candidates. They tried twice, basically, and they lost. But they want to blame it on...
Well, and you know what? Just because I'm feeling bolder and bolder... Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean
No, that was basically all I was going to say, is they just keep blaming it on the same old stuff that they always do.
Well, I want to go out there on a limb just because I think I can read the tea leaves and I can see the writing on the wall. And I think there's going to be some things that come out. But I think Donald Trump won in 2020. And I haven't wanted to sit, over all the years that Biden was president. I didn't want to be one of those people that just sat there and said, not the real president or,
right.
whatever. But I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see it, bro. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think it's going to come out. So.
That definitely would be interesting.
I think it would be interesting too. And it'll bring up so many other points. There's so many things that I'd like to say and have wanted to say for years, but I've tried to be polite, just like I think conservatives are better at being polite than Democrats are.
Right.
So, but anyway, can I say a couple things? Just a smattering of stuff real fast. I think we've also seen, there was another plane crash.
Yeah, unfortunately.
There was. And if you'd like to take a moment for silence, we could do that, I think, maybe. So obviously we pray for those people who are lost and their loved ones and, the tragedy of it. But I think it, again, highlights, it's not something, these things don't exist in a vacuum. And what Trump is talking about and trying to address, he's only been in office for less than 2 weeks. And for the media to go crazy and try to blame some stuff on his administration, his hiring freeze, like they've tried to say, right? Have you heard that line that he put in a hiring? This is his fault. Ridiculous.
Right.
Ridiculous. I just think it's so sad. And I think it does show that these things need to be addressed. And I'll throw this out there. This is a truly interesting thing that I've not heard anybody else say. Trump's brother, who was an alcoholic, was a pilot. I've not heard anybody echo this. He really respected his brother. He loved his brother.
That's the reason why he doesn't drink.
That's exactly right. And it's also why I think he gives so much credence to air traffic.
Mm-hmm.
It's something he holds up. Almost as being holy, almost as something, to aspire to, like his brother did. His brother aspired to be a successful pilot, even though that's not something that makes millions of dollars like Trump and his real estate.
Right.
But he had a lot of respect for his brother. He loved his brother. Almost in a Christian way. Doesn't this sound so Christian as I say the words?
Yeah.
To suggest that his interest in the FAA and these issues is political I think is almost demonic, because it's almost unchristian. You have no interest in your brother. You can't understand where he's coming from. You won't try. You won't understand that it even might come from a position of love or understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just so sad, and I've not heard anybody, even on, sort of the Fox News side. And I'm not saying that they haven't. I'm just saying I haven't heard it.
Right.
I've not heard anybody say this. Not even Trump. He's not going to sit there, because he's not the type. He's not going to sit there and say, my brother was a pilot, which is why I care so much. No.
Mm-hmm.
He knows why he cares.
Right.
He knows what motivates him to care. Not everything's a soapbox and a my grandmother died kind of story.
My son Bo died just like yours.
Yes.
In combat.
Bingo. Bingo.
Yeah.
And so I just want to throw that out there, because I think this is one of those things. I'll echo it one more time, but this is why I wanted to start this channel, is because I often remember stuff and say stuff that I don't see other people remembering and saying.
Right.
And I know that's part of why I love Trump so much, because I know he's a good man. I know it. I know. I don't know how to convince you. I know Jesus Christ was a good man. I know Donald Trump is a good man. I don't know what to tell you. Certain things you take on faith.
Right. Yep.
But it's not even, faith is interesting. It's an interesting choice, because I think there's a lot of evidence upon which you can build a faith.
Yeah. Right.
But anyway.
Yeah, I think in general it's pretty sad how, starting with the plane crash in D.C., how it immediately became a pretty political story.
Well, it's because people hate him.
Yeah.
They hate him because he can sit there and say, these things take 2 years and 3 years. And I don't want this to take 2 years or 3 years.
Right.
And people hate him for that. They
Right.
say, well, what do you mean you're getting out ahead of the officials? Well, don't you think, what's wrong with the world? Don't you think that the president knows way more than the people on CNN know?
Probably at least a little bit. He's the president.
A little bit? I think you're being way too cautious on that. I think he knew. He had already said it. He basically made it sound like he had heard the black box recording before they recovered the black box. Almost like they have a copy of it in the towers. Like, it's all broadcast on radio. Why couldn't it be recorded on other... You see what I'm saying? In other places, it's all radio waves and stuff. And yeah, maybe the black box gives you, let's say, an angle to it, or a couple extra seconds, or I don't know, some extra sounds you couldn't hear over the radio. There's probably ways that you could know. Do you get what I'm saying? Without touching it, without having the black box yet. Do you know what I mean? I mean, this isn't a mystery. What happened? You had 2 planes run together. Is it a mystery? But usually the media treats it like it's a mystery. We gotta wait until 3 years later in the dead of night, and the report finally comes out. When people don't even remember what the heck plane crash you're even talking about.
Right.
So it's one of those things I love about him. I get why people hate it. I do. I get why they sit there and say, "Why aren't you going ahead of your investigators, and aren't you coming to conclusions that..." Well, they just don't want Donald Trump to be the one coming to conclusions. That's what it is. But I bet you if they had a president that they loved, they'd be happy with it. Who wants to wait 3 years for results?
Yeah.
Give me a break.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
So, and he even said it. He said right there, he was doubled down and asked. I mean, it was a long segment. He does these long segments before the press. And they even asked him, they said, "Well, aren't there going to be reviews and stuff?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, yeah. And I think they'll find what I've said." Right. This is all just him talking. It's not like he said, "And they will say the same thing I just said."
Right.
No. Everybody needs to be fair.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's part of the way that he speaks. He's like speaking his mind about what he thinks was happening, and they'll find out, what the story is.
I get it too. I've had these complaints. Yeah. I love Donald Trump. I absolutely love Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. He's like heroin to me. I hate to say that. It's not funny. But I love him. I'm like addicted to the guy. I love listening to everything he says. And he even drives me nuts sometimes because, he'll go from A to Z in a heartbeat.
Yeah, the weave.
The weave, yeah. And people get left behind. They don't get the weave. They don't get what he's doing. How do you go from A to Z? And people get stuck on that. Yeah. How do you go from A to Z? And that's all they'll say. They drive themselves crazy saying, "How do you go from A to Z? How do you go from A to Z?" And they get online, they get their friends, everybody's got to agree. How he's got to be crazy to jump from A to Z. And they don't even try to see if there's a thread that weaves it all together or anything. They won't even be courteous or fair.
Right.
But just to finish my point, He even drives me nuts sometimes too, because people ask a very simple question. They'll say, "Well, what do you think about X?" And he'll say, "Well, I think A, D, K, J, M, and X." And they'll say, "Well, I only asked you about X." And he'll say, "Okay, well, hang on. J, M, X."
Right.
And people will say, "But I'm only asking about X." So see, it kind of is a little bit unnerving.
Yeah. Right. Right. Well, I guess that kind of brings us to, you had something you wanted to go talk about with the media, to kind of follow up something you were talking about last week, I believe, yeah?
Absolutely. I think this has all led in very well. I'll hit one more thing just as a surface level thing.
Sure.
Real fast, but have you seen, probably not, but maybe you've heard that there were images of Kristi Noem dressed up in ice gear. And people were mocking her like, who does she think she is? She's just in cosplay. That's what they said on the media. She's just in cosplay. She's not serious. She's just trying to look like G.I. Barbie. Those are my words, Frank's words.
Yeah.
But you get what I'm saying. She's trying to look like a bad chick.
Right.
Like a cool Barbie, an army Barbie.
Right. A G.I. Jane.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I just think so much of this stuff is preposterous. And yes, it goes back to where I ended our segment on the last recording. Is I just think our media is so shameful and ugly. Absolutely ugly. The way they smear. Like, of course, Kristi Noem, who ran on this stuff and who, someone like me might say, rode Trump's coattails or whatever. You could say all kinds of stuff. She's totally disingenuous, isn't she? Because it's like that. She's just trying to ride coach. There's no way that she could be honest or serious or legitimate. We just have to mock her. Look at this picture. Isn't this ridiculous? Look at her in the ICE uniform. She's just cosplaying. So you don't think, maybe I'm Jew Christian and they're not, but there's nothing in you that could say, maybe she believes this stuff. Maybe she really supports this stuff. You just have to instantly go negative. She's cosplaying.
Right.
That's what they run with. That's what they print in their headlines. She's cosplaying. Well, I get it because we live in a clickbait culture where people see stuff that they either agree with or totally disagree with and they click it, right? I get the clickbait. But I just hate how ugly, and that's what I would call it, just absolutely despotic our media is. And this is what I was talking about before. I called out Jim Acosta particularly just because he was a good example. I don't have anything against Jim Acosta. I think he's just a puppet doing a paid job. You know what I mean? Just some guy in a paid role. But he's quit.
Yep.
And I love it. I do love it. But I think our media is just so awful. And I was saying, how come these people aren't called out? How come they're not sanctioned? How come they're not fined? How come we can't just say, that journalistic malpractice should be defined as I don't know what you want to call it, a crime. And make some examples out of some people just so we can stop stuff like this. Well, that's what I was saying last week. In the subsequent week, Trump ordered a freeze on discretionary spending from, the executive side of government, that they can't just spend anymore. There's a freeze on spending.
Yeah, it was like loans and grants.
Well, the OMB, could you tell me again what that means?
Office of Management and Budget.
Yes. The Office of Management and Budget put out a memo based on his directive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they detailed what was going to be frozen, what was not going to be frozen, what was going to be affected, and what was not going to be affected. Black and white, clear as crystal, and it said that no individual payments, nothing from which there are individual benefactors, none of those people were going to be affected. They were only looking at these large sort of discretionary gifts, if you will. That's my terminology, but these were things like if they decided they wanted to build a fountain in the middle of their square,
right,
they could do it because that's money that the department has. And if they wanted to edify their buildings, if they wanted to plant some trees, if they wanted to, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's discretionary.
Right.
But sometimes they give that stuff away when they probably shouldn't. Maybe to outside people or outside parties or, let's say, political parties when they shouldn't. Well, these things were put on a hold. And this was all outlined in black and white in an OMB memo. But the media, certain outlets, I won't name them because, I could tell you why, but I just won't. I won't name the outlets. But there were outlets that went out and said, Trump has put us hold on all government spending, basically. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they had people scared out of their wits. I'm sure some people know this. You can see the videos on TikToks. Not TikToks, but TikTok of these people just in utter fear that their food stamps were going to be eliminated, their WIC for women, infants, and children was going to be canceled, that their Medicaid, Medicare, that their Meals on Wheels, they had these people scared to death. And remember, the months were just switching over, right? It was kind of great timing for that kind of a scare. From January into February, and most people get paid on the 5th or 6th with their benefits. Some people get paid later on the 15th. But they literally scared the bejesus out of people and tried to act like the misunderstanding was on the part of the administration and on the OMB and on the memo being hard to read. It was hard to read. But they're totally just disingenuous. They're ugly. They're wrong. I didn't want to call out certain networks because I hope they get sued. I'm not kidding. I mean, you want to talk about class action lawsuits? I've said it before. In my opinion, there's no reason that CNN should still be a major outlet. I'm sorry. I think they should be shut down. And not to call them, I'm not linking them to this. They're just my least favorite. But I think people ought to be able to, what do you call that? Some kind of fear? There's something. I know psychological harm. That's something you can sue for, isn't it?
People have definitely tried, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope you get my point. And I'm not just sitting here saying, I hope everybody becomes a millionaire because these outlets reported garbage. But I'm just saying I know in my heart that they did it for a bad reason, to try to discredit Trump, to try to hate on him. And it's like Reid said, I think these people are stupid. I think they're doubling down on stupid. I don't understand why they would try such tactics at such a time. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, we're playing chess against people who don't even know how to play checkers.
Right. Yeah, it just seems like the fear-mongering clickbait is what they think is going to bring them more money, more views, more ratings.
When I just thank God, and we can wrap up whenever you want to, but I just thank God that things have gone the way they have.
Right.
Nothing that they've said has been true. I mean, from the TikTok ban on down.
Right.
Nothing has worked out the way they, quote unquote, they have said it's going to.
Right. Yeah, well, thankfully.
We just keep winning.
Right. Anyway, listeners, if you have enjoyed this great conservative conversation, go follow us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe on YouTube. You can find us on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, and many more. And just search at Conservative Conversations 92 on YouTube. And let us know if you enjoy listening to these two dudes in their basement talk about the politics and the news. Because we enjoy talking about it. And if you have enjoyed some of these shorter episodes, I know this one's going to be be a little bit longer than our past few. But if you like the shorter ones, let us know. We'd be glad to hear some of your feedback. We would greatly appreciate it, listeners.
That's right. And I'd just like to tell you as a side note that this is only getting longer because we keep winning and there's so much going on.
Yep.
But we hope that you might share us with a friend or two, encourage them to become paid subscribers like you are so that they have access to the same exclusive and bonus content that you have access to. And as always, we wouldn't be able to do this without you. We hope you might give us a thumbs up, share us, leave a comment, and email us. Reid said to email us if you share your opinion. Email us if you don't.
Sure.
And we hope to see you next time.